House committees are currently wheeling and dealing behind the scenes to try and tinker with the Build Back Better Act, also known as the Reconciliation Bill, also known as the filibuster workaround for the stuff that wasn't included in that initial infrastructure bill, which was bipartisan. This is all essentially to avoid Republicans striking down a $3.5 trillion attempt at actually helping Americans. Everything from climate resilience to helping home care workers to healthcare reform, like we're going to be talking about right now. Except the key to this is getting Democrats on board. And sadly, in one of those committees, seems like Democrats are not on board with a key piece of this, which is reining in the price of pharmaceuticals. 3 House Democrats on a key committee join Republicans in rejecting a section of President Joe Biden's $3.5 trillion budget that proposed having Medicare negotiate prices, which would save the government money. Under the proposal, Medicare would effectively cap the amount it paid for drugs at 120% of the average price in Australia, Canada, France, Germany, Japan, and the United Kingdom. 120%, so we'll still be paying more, it's just capped. This would reduce the price of more expensive drugs in America and reduce federal spending by an estimated $456 billion over a decade, according to the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office. However, Democratic reps Scott Peters of California, Kathleen Rice of New York, and Schrader of Oregon each oppose the strategy, saying it discourages the development of new drugs. Okay. These are obviously three Democrats who had actually before in 2019 supported this exact bill. What does that show? It shows that the lobbyists that are working behind the scenes are working behind the scenes and they are crushing it. So the vote that they took in their committee showed that Democratic opposition to a high-profile portion of the package and reflected a major victory for drug manufacturers, led by the advocacy group Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America. Before I let you jump in, David, I just want to show you more about those 3 who voted no. Scott Peters in June got donations from Pfizer, Quest Diagnostics, Merck, Gilead Science, Bristol Myers, Squibb, and Abbott Labs. Head of Pfizer personally donated $5,800 to Peters in May. Then Kathleen Rice in June got donations from Teva Pharma, CVS Health, AHA, PCMAs, PAC, and Molina Health. She appears to have gotten more money from insurers and hospitals who generally support drug pricing bills than pharma companies. And then Schrader got donations from Sanofi, Vertex, Merck, and Prime and Koch, all reported in June last quarter. So corporate donations are working. David, thoughts?
Well, I mean, the standard argument that you hear from whether it's the pharmaceutical industry or anybody else that, oh no, if you eat into our profits, then somehow we're not going to be able to do the research and development to produce these wonderful drugs. That is absolute bunk. That is total nonsense. I mean, the pharmaceutical companies are already making a fortune. They're making a fortune from the vaccines. They're making a fortune from all sorts of other drugs. This was a reasonable solution that Democrats had in terms of pegging the cost that Medicare would pay for drugs and having a cap on it. The drug companies were still gonna make a lot of money from Medicare for these drugs under this proposal. But because some of them are so selfish and they're so wanting to grab as much money as possible, well, okay, they buy off their, some of the centrist Democrats. And by the way, we should be very clear. I mean, progressives like to talk about, the Republicans, but no, centrist Democrats are also part of the problem. The centrist Democrats, the establishment Democrats who are bought and paid for by various industries, including big pharma, they still stand in the way of progress. And as a result, there are gonna be those, grandmas and grandpas and aunts and uncles and various elderly people who cannot afford the drugs that Medicare is suggesting that they take because they have to, they're too expensive. And as a result, they're gonna go without food or they're gonna cut back on all sorts of other things. That's what this is about. This is about making the drugs accessible to the most vulnerable people in our society, the people who are elderly and frail. And yet we're putting a priority on profits of the big pharma, and Democrats are doing this? It's just, it's sickening.
Right, and we're talking about Medicare, right? We're talking about the government's ability to negotiate prices. we're talking about an actual free market. And like the thing we all need to remember here is that when people say free market this, free market that, what we actually have is not a free market. We have monopolies, we have incredible amounts of subsidies, we have who then funnel back into lobbying to buy our democracy. It is not a free market currently, right? We understand that. Look, if it were a free market, then we wouldn't just be watching this show on like a few giant tech platforms, thanks to the tech overlords. However, thank you for your service, I think. But you know what I'm saying? Like, none of this is a free market, right? So this was the Energy and Commerce Committee. That's where this detente happened. So these 3 Democrats voted against this, and it did not pass. However, the same language that is going to be part of this larger bill did pass in the Ways and Means Committee, so it could make it. It seems like it will make it to that final bill. However, if that final bill is to be passed by the House, you need Democrats on board. And like David is saying, a lot of these centrist Democrats who are bought by big pharma are not going to be on board. So Democrats can only afford to lose 3 votes on the Build Back Better Act when it reaches the House floor. They can't lose any in the Senate, of course, that's why it's filibuster proof. And this provision lost 3 votes in just 1 committee, right? So this is what folks are saying. There will be likely some drug price negotiation provision in the final package, but the less aggressive it is, the less it will reduce the cost of prescription drugs and the less cash Democrats will have freed up to cover the remainder of their agenda. And as long as the moderates are demanding that the whole package be paid for, that's a problem. That's according to Jim Newell from Slate. So again, that is basically saying a lot of the moderates are going into this negotiation, including Joe Manchin, including Kristen Sinema. And they're like, look, where does the money come from? How are we gonna pay for this $3.5 trillion? And and the progressive Democrats are like, well, we raise the prices, we save all this money, by not having to pay this much for Medicare for this medicine. Right? So essentially we're saving whatever it was, $356 billion. There you go, there's some money right there. And then moderates are like, no, we can't do that to big pharma. We also can't do that, so no, where are we going? So anyway, they're damned if they do, damned if they don't. The machinations continue behind the scenes. Any last thoughts before we move on?
No, I look, you got it pegged. And at a certain point, we as a society have to decide who are we going to give the power to? Are we going to give them to the pharmaceuticals, which by the way, Canada buys those same drugs for a lot cheaper than our government buys them. It is such a waste of money. And the pharmaceuticals are still making a ton of money, regardless of whether they're selling to Canada or whether they're selling to the US government.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.